Hi, friends, and welcome to the end of the year 2016 CYMS Christmas newsletter. What do you want to call this? Like a video podcast type thing, a vodcast, something like that. Well, welcome to it. My name is Daniel White Hodge. For those of you who don't know me, I am the director of the Center for Youth Ministry Studies, and I'm also a professor here of youth ministry at North Park University in Chicago. I will apologize in advance. Today they are working right outside my office doing some heavy work with drill bits and all that good stuff. So if you hear some material behind me in the background, that's exactly what it is. But I wanted to go ahead and get this out because I think there are some important things I wanted to talk to all of us about in relation to the this year, but particularly in relation to the election and the election results. I thought long and hard before sending, wanting to put this together and sending it out, but the reality of it is that here at the center, and particularly where the direction that we're headed in, we are not afraid of engaging in controversial topics. We do not shy away from engaging and really diving into areas that a lot of other folks just won't. And I think something about this particular election season is different. Almost everyone I talk with, whether they voted, didn't vote, voted for Trump, voted for Hillary, said this was a different election season. This was not business as usual. And so with that in mind, I think it's important for those of us who work with young people, who advocate for young people, who are in churches, nonprofits, who are in non-faith-based organizations out there working with young people, to have just kind of a grounding. I don't claim what I'm going to do here in the next half hour is going to change the world, but I at least wanted to get the conversation going. I think it's very important that we begin to engage with this particular subject matter. I'm getting at least 5 or 6 emails or Facebook messages every day on issues that related to this, and so I felt it was important that we here at the center bring this up and really engage in it. So I'm going to ask for a couple of different things. One, I know this is a contentious time, and everybody. I just got back from the American Academy of Religion, one of my guilds, one of my main guilds that I go to as a professor and as a professional. And everyone, it was kind of like, how can I put it? It was everything is truth, everything is not truth, right? It's very difficult in these days to have a civil conversation, a civil discourse on areas, particularly on things that we don't disagree with, right? We're very polarized on some of these things. And so I would ask first that if you get into this and you're like, man, I don't know about that, I don't know. I'm going to ask that you stay with me a little bit, right? I'm going to ask that you kind of walk with me through this. And I do invite questions. I invite conversation. I am not a debater on Facebook. I am not a debater on Twitter. I do post a lot. For those of you who follow me and keep up with me on social media, you know that I do post a lot and I do try to get material out there. But for me, I'm just claiming my age. I'm a Gen Xer. I like face to face. I like and phone calls if that's what we have to do. So I'm going to ask that, you would do that and let's have a conversation around this. But I thought it was important to engage in this material. Let's move forward here with what we're going to be talking about. So this was a talk that I gave at Faith Forward this last year. I've given it in a couple of other different places, but this is where it originated from. My good friend and colleague and also CYMS advisory team member, Michael Novelli, invited me out, and so this was a talk that we did talking about Let's Make America Racist Again, youth ministry in an era of the archetype Donald Trump. So this is the conversation I want to frame today because I know we got some stuff to deal with. We do. I don't care if you're in a suburban ministry. I don't care if you're in a rural ministry. I don't care if you're in an urban ministry. I don't care whatever context you are. If you are within the United States, especially within the United States, this is something we're going to have to engage with. There was not a young person under the age of 10 that I've spoken with since the election that hasn't brought up the election. And I talk with a lot of kids. I'm not saying I'm the end all be all, but I am saying these are some issues. These are some things that are on the top of young people's minds. And I think the church is a good place. The environment, the community of God is a good place for us to start having these conversations. I want to just take us around the corner a little bit here on this. And some of you may already be just, oh my gosh, make America racist again. America was never racist. I'm going to ask you, you know what? You got to take a history lesson. Straight up. We are living in a country that was rooted in racism, rooted on violence, rooted on hate. And I know some of us want to believe the myth that this country was based on Christian, upright leaders and all that good stuff. But when I read history, as a black man, racially speaking, ethnically I'm African American and Mexican American, but as a black man reading history, I don't see that myth or that narrative that is the most commonplace that we have in our society today, right? The oh, America was so great and we defeated the British and came to a free country. Well, none of you were dark skinned. And so when I think about this understanding, it really is an oxymoron title, right? It's like, let's make America racist again. Well, it never stopped being racist. So, and that's something that here at the center and here in our major, we try to engage students with and say, you know what? How does race, how does gender, how does sexual orientation, all those things that we just tend to just back away from, right, and kind of pretend they're not there, how do those things actually affect ministry? Because they do. They do. And if we've seen anything, 4 out of 5 evangelicals, 81% of evangelicals, white evangelicals, Christian evangelicals voted for Trump. Those are conversations we need to be having. I'd imagine those are some of the same folks who are coming into our communities and doing performing short-term missions. How do they view people of color? How do they view that, you know? And how do we engage with subjects and topics like abortion, right? You think about abortion, it's like, okay, I support the right to live and life and everything, but do we support those same lives if they're black bodies? Do we support those same lives if they're brown bodies coming to this country try to seek refuge? Do we support those lives when they are living in a place like Flint, Michigan, drinking water that is contaminated? Do we support that? Do we get behind that? Do we support Native Americans who are saying, I need to take a stand, I need to stop what is coming into my land, our sacred land? Do we support that as well? And so I want to genuinely ask those questions and think, if those of us who work in churches, those of us who work in ministry settings, we have some stuff to engage with. So let's begin. I think it's important to kind of look back at kind of some of the ground zero stuff that's happened when you think about Darren Wilson, Michael Brown, Ferguson, Baltimore, that this is an ongoing issue. When you think about police and the understanding of a police state, this is not something that we can overlook as youth ministers. This is not something that we can begin to just kind of grace over. It is something that we have to engage with. It is something that we have to embrace, because at the end of the day, this is going to affect our young people. And particularly those of you in the rural and urban environment. I get suburban, right? But it's coming. It's coming to you. Those of you in the suburban environment, it's coming. It just takes a little while longer to get out there. But in the rural, if I heard anything from this election, I heard that rural America feels cheated. They feel marginalized. They feel like they have been left out. And for that, I really do have to apologize, because folks like myself have been talking about urban cities, the justice and economic equality for that. And I apologize, because we've left the rural environment out, and we got to begin to engage the rural context when you think about what's happening in places that aren't the city. Now, that's a whole other discussion, but I at least want to put that out. When you think about police actions, and when you think about what has happened, particularly with Black Lives, I just wanted to kind of show this illustration. I know this has been passed around social media a bit, but I wanted to re-illustrate some of these things. And particularly, I'm forgetting the man's name who drove up to Washington, D.C. this last weekend, armed, fired off a round, and was arrested. Not shot and killed. And then when you think about Walter Scott, when you think about Trayvon Martin, when you think about black bodies, those things affect. If any of you have black bodies in your youth group, these are conversations you got to be having. I get that Black Lives Matter is a controversial statement for some. It's not controversial for me. In fact, we're running a whole class on Black Lives Matter this spring here at North Park. If you're interested, hit me up. But I think it's important to say Black lives aren't better, Black lives aren't less than, but Black lives matter. Okay? Black lives matter. It's just that we matter. That as a black person on this planet, as somebody who God has designed, right? Our life matters. My life matters. Not necessarily any higher than anybody else's, but it matters. And the fact that we have to have that hashtag suggests that there is an egregious problem happening today. Few things here. We think about Ferguson, Michael Brown, was the straw that broke the camel's back. We think about Ferguson's population. Black population, 67%. Black represented in city council, 17%. Black represented in police force, 6%. Vehicle stops involving black motorists, 86%. Now, I've been down to Ferguson multiple times, and I can tell you that almost every African-American person that I talked with from Ferguson had said they had been unjustly stopped. And that the civil and the public, right, places like the police department, fire department, had all been built off of the backs of people who had been unjustly stopped. So that creates tension. There's already tension going on here, right? When you think about some of these things, when you think about what's happening, and what causes somebody to uprise. Children being pushed out into prison. Now, I'll pause this here. You can pause it. I'm going to, enlarge this. I'm enlarging this slide here so you can take a look at it. I don't have the time to get into this, but I think it's important to look because these are some real statistics that are affecting us. And you think, well, Dan, that's not my ministry. That's not what I'm doing. Just wait. It's coming to you. I think the era and the day, is coming quickly to an end where we're going to have to redefine how we look at urban, suburban, rural ministry. And again, that's for a different talk. But I want you to kind of take a look at this and soak this in. Okay, and so as we, as we think about the lenses that we see different people through, as we think about the lenses that we view the world, and I thought this was an interesting illustration here when we think about, the white vision glasses. What do you see? We black thug this. When you think about protesters, right? The protesters who were in Oregon were just that. They were activists. They were protesters. But when black folks do it, or people of color do it, then they're thugs. They're rioting. They're looting. It's kind of the whole thing up in arms about Kaepernick. It's like, he can't take this knee, right? And I get that, that's controversial because, again, we're stepping on myths and narratives that have been established, right, as ideology, as truth, and as really nostalgia. Nostalgia is always looked back upon as good. Think about somebody. Well, I'll think about this. I'll just use my own example, right? When I was growing up, my grandfather and I, we just didn't have a good relationship. I was good for nothing to him and this and this and that. And he would call me all kind of names under the sun. So when he passed, right before he passed, we made our peace and it was great. But when he passed, it was like everybody going up talking about Grandpa, all the good stuff like that. It's like, I got to keep it real. I cannot remember Grandpa in this overarching positive light. I'm going to honor the dead, right? I'm not going to disrespect him, but I also have to keep it real. I have to tell this was my experience with him. And I think a lot of times we begin to look at that and begin to say, oh, he's disrespecting the flag. Oh, he's disrespecting the narrative of this country. Oh, he's disrespecting fallen soldiers. Have you stopped to ask yourself, though, why would somebody like Kaepernick take this knee? What is going on? What is behind the scene? What is going on? What is causing somebody to pause during a game and to take that knee? Those are questions I think we have to ask. We have to be engaged with, particularly as ministers of the gospel. All right. Well, I wanted to roll through these slides real quick. Some of you have already seen these, but I at least wanted to give them to you. These were slides that I took while I was in Ferguson multiple times. This is where Mike Brown was shot. I show these to you because I think it's important to see, because typically what we get filtered sometimes through media is not exactly what's going on. So I thought the first time I went down there with our former assistant director, Allison Burkhart, I was just blown away. We were both just blown away, at what was going on, what was happening, and how things like this all connect to identity, space, place, geographic settings, all of this. And I think, pictures say a lot more than I could actually say. So I thought it was important for us to spend some time looking at these photos, because I think this connects to us as all youth ministers and all youth workers. There wasn't anyone really who could really say they were disconnected or disattached from this, whether they agreed, disagreed, or try to remain neutral. Which, by the way, is really a false statement, right? Oh, I want to be neutral. Like, no, you picking a side. Your silence either picks it one way or the other. And so this was important because I think this is really what galvanized a lot of people. Trayvon Martin did, but man, when Mike Brown, when this happened, and then just kind of the narratives that came after that have really created a movement. I think this slide here really just says it all. I think America, wake up. And when will we wake up, right? That's kind of the slogans online, right? Woke. I'm woke. I want to be woke. Are you woke? You know, this is the station where it all began, with the allegations that, you know, Mike was trying to steal a cigarillo, and, you know, and that he walked down, you know, he was getting into a fight and stuff. And so, you know, this is one of the places that got burnt. Again, just more pictures of Mike Brown. This was a memorial. This is when I went back in April with our class. This was a memorial that was put up. Interestingly enough, the city did not take the people in the community into account for this. And so it was very interesting to kind of just see how people's reaction was to this. It wasn't very favorable, although it was nice to have it. And it's actually about 80 yards away from where Mike Brown was actually killed. And then I thought this was very interesting, this slide here, because I know some of you would be like, oh my gosh, Dan, you have the 4-letter words. But here's the thing, y'all. If you know me, you know that a large part of my theology, my ideology, my worldviews revolves around the sacred, the secular, and the profane. And I think God shows up in the intersections of all three of those areas. And so for me, yes, we need to talk about peace. Yes, we need to talk about that. But we have to start with the F your peace first. That for me is exactly where Jesus Christ has been engaging with, has been lived in. As I read my Bible, as I understand the gospel narrative, Jesus lived in the very epicenter of the sacred, the secular, and the profane. And so when somebody wrote this on one of the one of the monuments there, or not even monument, just this is a traffic light, kind of where all the connectors come together. F your peace stood out to me, and I believe that as ministers we have to begin to engage that. All right, so now I'd like to talk about kind of what Trumpism and youth ministry looks like. I'd like to first talk a little bit about how Trump came into, and this is not an exhaustive, I'm going to be breaking that down for a few years to come, for a few months to come, and there are some articles that I'll be here in this newsletter that you should take a look at, some research that I've recently published in terms of this. There is a complexity. It is not a singular issue. People try to say, oh, well, it's because there were people who didn't vote that, got Trump. No. This is a much larger issue that I feel connects directly, particularly with Christianity in the United States. So let's get going here. When you think about Trumpism, we're dealing with an aspect of hypermasculinity. Our country loves men that are hypermasculine. We like men that kick ass and take names and just say, screw everybody else. We like that. Even though we try to say on the surface that we want somebody who is, kind, and we want somebody who's generous and takes time, a humble. No. We love. I mean, just look at the amount of movies that have leading male roles that are just that. They kick ass, they take names, right? And they save women. And that's a whole other discussion for you women out there, right? That's a whole other discussion, right, on how men can come and save the woman. We love that. That's etched into the deep roots of Christianity. One need only go to a summer camp to understand that, all right? Well, what else? Well, we also like violence. You think, what? Oh, no, Dan. Peace and violence. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you straight up. When we went back to Ferguson this last spring, man, a young brother said it like this. He said, non-violence is a position of the privileged. It is a privileged ideology to take. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. But think about it. When you think about it, people of color are asked to forgive and forget quickly. Slavery, I got to get over it, man. That happened 400 years ago. Stop that. Well, what about, segregation? Oh, dude, come on, man. You guys are great houses now. Come on, All right, well, what about, prison industrial complex? Oh, dude, those people are bad. You just got to forget about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, what about black bodies? Oh, man, that happened, a whole month ago. Like, what are you doing talking about that? 9/11. Dude, we'll never forget. Right? We went in and we loved that violence. We engaged it. I mean, think about the celebrations that happened when Osama bin Laden was killed. I mean, think about that. How does that connect, right? How does that connect with the gospel of Jesus Christ? I mean, that's something we got to think about. It's something we got to engage with. We also like aspects of celebrityism. We love our celebrities. Whoa, Lord have mercy. We love those celebrities. You just look at some of the stuff that's out there, right? We love celebrityism. We also like non-politically correct, particularly those of you who are in, power and authority. I want to call a nigga. I want to call, women bees. I want to call, what I'm saying? I don't want to have to be political. I want to have to think through what it is you want to be identified as. Right? Oh, we like that. Oh, we revel in that. This is rooted in American exceptionalism. This understanding that America is God's nation. This understanding that America was chosen. That America is, we love these narratives. And when you combine all this hypermasculinity, violence, celebrityism, non-politically correct, man, you have a powerful symbol. Trump embodied all of this. Then you have the aspect of white Christianity, which in seminaries we don't call it Christianity or white Christianity, right? We just call it Christianity. It is the norm. This is something that my good friend and colleague Soon-Chan Ra has been talking about for years. Rather than labeling it, this is white evangelical Christianity, because we got black liberation. No. It's here's Christianity, here's theology, and then everything else off on the side becomes kind of these adjuncts to that. So when you combine this, you have an interesting engagement with somebody like Trump. You have male domination in youth ministry. We know that for a fact. Got a book just the other day, just dominated by men, all but one woman, right? We also have Eurocentric power, white male power. And this is, again, not knocking white people per se. It's looking at, and I'm going to have some definitions here in a second for you, because every good educator should, but it is looking at the aspect of white supremacy in youth ministry. When we think about curriculum, how we talk about kids, how we engage kids. We also have the ministry industrial complex, which has been emboldened to sell, to connect with celebrities, big names. Let's get this, let's get that. And so it's a complex. It's an industrial complex, part of the capitalistic model to sell things. Now you say, well, Dan, look, I know you sell books, right? What's up? Hey, yeah, I get that, right? I'm not saying I'm not culpable in some form, right? We live in this society, but my point is that when it becomes a mode and a means, and then all it becomes is a way for you to just sell stuff, it becomes problematic. But that's kind of, right? That's what we wanted with Trump, right? We wanted somebody who was able to go in and, get the job done, a businessman, right? The avoidance of issues on social inequality. That's big time in youth ministry, man. I mean, I'm sure there's some people watching right now like, why do we have to keep talking about this? This is a social gospel. This has nothing to do with ministry. I don't know. I would firmly disagree. And then, of course, you have just white supremacy in U.S. Christianity. When you combine these things, you have a very, very, very powerful figure in Trump. When you combine these things into political discourse, social media, and then you move things into the aspects of things. Think about this. Things from the margin, aspects of the Klan, neo-Nazis, extreme white supremacy, right? That were once on the margins are now in popular discourse. Think how popular and really just almost mainstream swastikas have become over the last 3 weeks. And you think, well, Dad, that didn't happen in my youth ministry experience. Right, that may not necessarily have been there, but the undergirdings have been there. White folks have been telling us as people of color that they haven't wanted us for a long time. Right? It's been in the people they select for keynotes, and then they select for workshops, and select for publications and books. So these things have been there. Trump was just able to galvanize those and bring them to the surface. Okay, so we've covered a little bit about the aspects of, how Trump came into power and then connects back to ministry. I'd like to spend a little time just on two definitions that we hear a lot. This is my own definition of white supremacy, and then I want to define hegemony and what that means and how those relate. So you can take a look at this. I'm zooming the slide here so you can kind of read it as I talk. I'm not necessarily going to read it verbatim. But I'll start with the first one, the subconscious promotion of white culture as the best or white is right. This is typically done, like I'm saying here, subconsciously. Let me put it another way. As a man, it's easy for me to overlook women because of the privilege that has been given. Relative privilege. I'm a black man, but nevertheless, I'm a male. The relative privilege has been given to me as a man. So if I'm putting a panel together, I was putting a panel together one time on hip-hop and gender. And I'm sitting there thinking, I got a great panel, until my wife looks at it and she says, you in hip-hop and gender, huh? All right. You don't got any women on there whatsoever? And I was like, whoa! I just didn't even see it. And so the subconsciousness that's in there, right? And then you got the projection and shifting of social inequality and racism back onto people of color and minorities. Blame the victim worldview, right? It's their fault. They keep talking about it. They keep bringing it up. Now you have kind of the alt-right, or really Nazis, neo-Nazis, alt-right, what I'm saying? That are saying now, you got people of color telling us that we're racist. Well, man, you know what I'm saying? If the shoe fits. But at the end of the day, there are these type of ideologies that exist in our churches, in our ministry organizations right now. Now, it won't come out that way necessarily. I mean, it may, now that Trump's in there. I mean, he's emboldened a racist society. But we're going to reshift this and put it back on people of color. It's your fault. Well, you shouldn't have been running away from the cop. That would have been, that your own foolishness got yourself killed. That was what one of the jurors said, right, in the Scott trial. So this is the definition that I see of as white supremacy. Not necessarily always the neo-Nazis, the Klan. I think that's extreme, and we're having a resurgence of that coming back into mainstream in society. Of course, they're coming back saying, oh, we're just protesting for our right to be white, right? It's like, well, that's part of that white supremacy. You haven't historically been discriminated against. You haven't historically had systems against you. You haven't historically had your entire ethnic group imprisoned, and what that looks like. So this is one of my definitions of white supremacy. This is my definition of hegemony: authority, dominance, and constructs of the aforementioned through systems, ideology, and dogma within a society, culture, or organization. So when you go to camp and you listen to music, what type of music are you listening to? Right? When when I was with Young Life and we did, music up front, I mean, it was always a guitar, it was always kind of this thing. My students of color, they just could not connect with it. And when I would bring this to the attention and say, hey man, we need to get something different, it was just kind of always looked at like, well, they just kind of got to get with it. Or maybe what it is, what you need to do is start making your club a little bit more, appropriate to the, to the Young Life standard. Now I know things have changed. That was almost 20 years ago. But have they? Have they? That's really the question I think we gotta ask ourselves. All right, so I'd like to spend the last 4 minutes here kind of looking at, what youth ministry in the era of Trump really looks like. I think it's important to engage this conversation because it's something that I think we all have to wrestle with. Now, don't get it twisted. I think that at the end of the day, I think all of us are trying to figure out, okay, what do we do from here? Where do we go from here? So this is just the first attempt at moving forward. I think multicultural ethnic emergence, the growth of the Christian church, I think Christianity is becoming more multi-ethnic. It's not becoming whiter. And really the threat to whiteness, this white lash, if you will, as some people have called it, right, has really been what we saw in this election, right? It's this pushback to say, man, ethnic minorities, people this and that, they're getting too much power. And it's as Kelly Brown Douglas says in her excellent book, Stand Your Ground, Black Bodies and the Justice of God, one of the required readings for my Black Lives Matter class. This is what she says. Today, the manifest destiny, stand your ground culture war is fueled by the presence of a black man living in the White House. There's no greater challenge to America's grand narrative Anglo-Saxon exceptionalism than a black president. This represents a complete encroachment upon the space reserved for cherished white property. It is no surprise, therefore, that stand your ground culture has asserted itself in an aggressive and unrelenting manner. Woo! 3 major challenges to multi-ethnic ministries: assumptions of normality, this idea that the way it is for me should be the way it is for you, unequal distributions of power, we already talked about that, color blindness, this idea that I don't see color, no, you see it. These are 3 major challenges. Then of course we have Western white captivity of the church, neo-urban colonialism and short-term missions. I just published an article on that. I'm going to encourage you to read that. I expand on that much more. Being mentored, I think it's important for those of you who are white, being mentored by a different ethnicity, being submissive to someone who is ethnically different than you. And the damage ignorance can do. Intent versus impact. Well, I had great intentions. Well, I stopped using that excuse, particularly with somebody with my wife. About the 3rd week I was married. I can't tell my wife, oh, well, I meant to do this. It's like, dude, you'll impact. And oftentimes American right-wing conservative Republican equals Christianity and being Christian. Now, if you're any of those things, I'm not knocking you. Please don't hear that. But it's problematic for us to say that that's the only and the verifying form of Christianity, because it's just not. It's just not. All right, so here's we're looking at kind of the wrapping this thing up. I wanted to talk a little bit about some ideas that I have of moving forward in the tension. I wanted to start with a quote from Soong-Chan Ra's excellent book, The Next Evangelicalism. He says this on page 200. He said, "We face a challenging reality. We live under the reality of the oppression of the Western white captivity of the church. We may claim that our version of evangelicalism is culture-free, that we are merely trying to be culturally relevant, or that we are trying to maintain the church's tradition, and thereby ultimately reject the claim of cultural captivity. But the reality of the situation is that Western white culture dominates American culture, and in turn, dominates American evangelicalism." Now, I think it's important for us to engage in this, for several reasons. Because again, one, there are students in your youth group. The generation that is coming up right now is extremely critical of American Christianity, U.S. Christianity. Extremely. I know I'm a little over time here, but work with me here. They're so critical of this that they are willing to say, I'm no longer, defined as an evangelical. Now, I'm going to have a whole podcast series on that coming up, so prepare yourself for that. So that's coming. But there is a generation that is saying, I don't know. I don't know about this whole thing of evangelical. I don't know about this whole thing of Christianity. And because people ain't going to spend the time to look at the vast diversity, people say, well, evangelicalism is the only thing of Christianity. I get that. But it's the same way when people say, well, all black folks ain't this way, but police ain't doing the work and going in and seeing, oh, well, this person just had a water gun. Oh, this person was unarmed. No, they're not. So the same thing with a lot of young folks is they're saying, look, man, Christians are acting this way. I don't want nothing to do with it. And I don't want to, and here's the thing though, I don't want to use that as an excuse, because oftentimes we use that as like, oh, they're running away from church. Oh no, woe is us. Woo, stop. No. That's just one factor. The other factor is that people are looking at and imaging who God is through a completely warped and racialized lens. So I think we have to look at these things because it is important, as those of you who are working in ministry settings, who are working with young people. Young people today are far more engaged and want to have these conversations than youth were even 10 years ago. Okay? So moving forward in the tension is important. Let's start here with number one, moving beyond good intentions. Good intentions is okay. I think good intentions is well, really, you know what, man? This is a Trump era. It's not okay. I'm just going to keep it real. I'm going to keep it 100, as the young people say. Good intentions is a baby step forward, but you cannot stay there on good intentions. You just can't. Because at the end of the day, good intentions, though they're good, it is the impact that has the lasting effect. One of the research articles that I have published recently in a journal, I interviewed a lot of young people, in regards to this, and the effect of good intentions is big time, and it is damaging. It hurts people. If nothing else, do we really want to be hurting people with faith? You say, well, Dan, what do I do? I mean, I hear you, but that's a good place to start. You come at it with all the answers, and I got it. Look, sis, bruh, you're going to be continuing colonialism. If you come in thinking that your brand of Christianity is the only way, that's just continuing colonialism. Which is the next point, engaging and dismantling the great white hope worldview, particularly for those who are white-run organizations in the city. Yeah. And what does that mean? Or in the rural context, because guess what? There are black and brown rural folks. People think that rural America is all white. It is not. Let's just dispel that myth. So we got to begin to take apart this myth that says, white people save us. They take care of us. They have the money. Then this and this and that. We need to begin to dismantle that. There's ways to do that. I know I'm kind of just throwing these things out there, but I want you to kind of understand that we had to begin to dismantle that. So as someone who is white and somebody who recognizes their privilege and their construct and all this, it is important, it is imperative that you begin to figure out ways to deconstruct that. But one of the ways you're going to be able to do that is by listening to people who are on the margins, people who are ethnic minorities, people who don't have the power. That's part of laying down that privilege, especially in this era. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be real hard, because now a lot of white evangelicals are emboldened by Trump to say, we don't have to do any of this. I'm not racist. I'm not privileged, Meanwhile, they're saying, I don't see any color, right? It's like, oh my gosh. So engaging and dismantling the great white hope is a big task. None of these things I'm saying are easy. Because number 3 is embracing the multi-ethnic Jesus. We like white Jesus. We do. We like white Santa. We like white God. We just like whiteness through all out. When you see that white Santa and that show, or that black Santa that shows up, man, you be like, wait a minute, that's not the narrative. I get it. Embracing a multi-ethnic Jesus is going to be rough. It's going to be real rough. This is a place we got to go. I don't think the Christian faith is something that is so easy and simplistic that we can say a European lived, right, in Africa at that time, right, with no shade, and it was just white as day. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. You say, well, Dad, it doesn't matter the color of Jesus. Oh, it matters. Study after study shows, confirms that how people view deity, how they engage with the supernatural is extremely important to one's identity and one's understanding of the afterlife, the supernatural, and the religious experience. And so we have to take that into consideration. Number 4, prepare for the shit. We got to prepare for it. And we got to develop curriculum with it in mind. You say, Dad, this is crazy. I know it is crazy, but this is a Trump era. We cannot go on as business as usual. We have to begin to look at how we prepare for the shit, the mess, the crap, the funk, the nefariousness of life. We have to begin to prepare for that. And I'm encouraging you as youth workers, as youth pastors, to think about where are those margins? Where is that crap within there? And how do we build around that? How do we get a movie and have it end up with questions like Interstellar? How do we begin to look at aspects of justice and engage with aspects of the prison industrial complex with a documentary like 13th? I mean, these are all things that I think we have to begin to think about and engage with, because our young people are. You say, well, Dad, I don't know about my young people. They're thinking about it. Trust me, it's in there. Oh, it's in there. Number 5, engage with your youth. Have these conversations. Have these conversations. Engage with them. And when you're engaging and you run into walls, well, guess what? Let's go talk to those on the margins. Let's listen to them. Let's listen to the stories. Don't cross-examine. Don't try to disprove it and tell them it doesn't happen or this isn't real. But listen. So these are 6 areas. Again, I'm saying these off real quick. I know we're at the 36-minute mark. I apologize, but hopefully this will give us some starting point as we think about youth ministry in 2017, because we have a lot to contend with. 2016 has been a rough year for those of us who are engaged with the work and the building of the Christian faith, the urban, rural, multi-ethnic environment, and of course, aspects of interculturalism, which are all things that the university that we're a part of at North Park, and I'm so happy to be a part of it, that this university is a part of. And so it's something that the center stands for, something that the major stands for, and I think in these 6 areas we have to be engaged with. Now, this list will grow, but I think we have to be engaged with it today. All right. Well, thank you. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for hanging in this long. Again, these are topics and engagement sessions that I think it's crucial that we at the Center here for Youth Ministry Studies provide you with. We are going to pick up our webinar series again. We've just had a setback, and not a setback, that's the wrong word. We just had a kind of a pausing on that. We've got new software, so we're working on that. Katrina is getting her full rhythm and stride, since Allison left, and so we're going to be picking those up again. We're also, we have our first series of our podcast up, and that's going to be coming out as well. So we're going to be putting out some material that I think is extremely important in these days, moving ahead in the Trump era. For those of us who are engaged with this understanding of consciousness and racial inclusivity and intercultural engagement, we have a rough 4 years ahead of us. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and be like, oh, I'm encouraged and I'm hopeful. No, I'm still in a state of lament. And I think we have to begin to learn more about lament, because we have forgotten what it's like to lament. Well, all we want to do is celebrate. And it's not a whole gospel if all we're doing is celebrating, because life isn't just about celebrating. It is about sadness. It is about lament. It is about walking through that and sitting and feeling the pain. And that's where I'm at right now. It's where a lot of people are at. I know that some people watching this right now are feeling the same way. So I look forward to your conversations. Here's my contact information. That's my email. That website, that's my direct office line. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. My latest book is Hip Hop's Hostile Gospel. I go into some of these issues as well, looking at it through a hip hop lens. Of course, my former book before that, The Soul of Hip Hop. And if you want to go old school, to my very first book, it's called Heaven Has a Ghetto, looking at the theology and gospel of Tupac Amaru Shakur. Peace and blessings to y'all. Continue to keep hope alive as much as you can, even in the state of lament. And let's keep pushing forward in this era of Trump. Blessings, Merry Christmas, and have a great New Year. We'll see you soon. Peace.